My question was about echinacea. I had a friend who had cancer, melanoma cancer, and he went to a herbalist and was given echinacea, and he was taking quite large doses of it. I can't remember how much. But I'm wondering whether that helped suppress the cancer, and possibly, I was told that it was supposed to help the immune system, stimulate the immune system, and in that way help to fight somewhat. But what can you help?
With echinacea, I'm not entirely certain, because it's always touted as an aid to the immune system. But on the other hand, it may have a suppressant effect there. I'm not entirely certain. But a thing that I would look at here is this. John talked last week about the red blood cells in the body, and how this is actually how the tissue, and you all got an article last week on this. And he talked about how the tissue is going to be formed in the body out of the red blood cells, where the red blood cells are ultimately going to entrain to the energy pattern that exists there in that area. And it seems like what might happen with some of the herbs there is it might help to at least temporarily alter the energy pattern in the body, to where or change the terrain within the body, to where perhaps the condition of the body might change in that area. I'm looking at possibly a third possibility here, where it may not have to be either a healing or a suppression, but maybe almost more of a lateral sidestep, where the terrain changes enough to where the cancer's gone, and yet you really haven't overcome it yet.
We do know that certain types of herbs will have a stimulating or a retarding effect on different organs and functions of the body. But let me just have you reconsider the scale of emotionality, that if the thymus is having a problem, which is the immune system, please remember that the thymus will never work until you have worked up to the point, through unconsciousness first of all, which clear the gonads, up through the apathy, which clears out the spleen, and work out the suppressed grief, which gets rid of the problems with the adrenals and the pancreas, and then gradually the thymus comes clear. So if a person has a pancreatic problem, which most people do, then that pancreatic problem is going to be of such a nature that the thymus is not going to work and the immune system isn't going to work. And so I take a look at people who are trying to boost the immune response, and it just doesn't work for most people, because the pancreas and the adrenals have never been brought to the point where they function normally. Now, the reason they don't function is because the spleen doesn't function. The reason it doesn't function is because the gonads aren't functioning. It goes right down through the endocrine system. So you have to find out where the blockages are. Now, this I found out over many, many years of observing. And it doesn't follow logically medical patterns of suppressing and stimulating different organs to function, or to suppress different things that are happening in the body. You can force temporarily an organ to function if you use strong drugs. There's no question about that. You can do a few little things with herbs, and there's no question about that. But after you quit using the herb, the body slips back to how it was before, and it's just the immune system won't be working. So you have to get these other areas cleared away first, and that's why you hold the body perfectly still when you're holding points. Facilitation, Lewis, that you ask questions about, sir. I'm not really that much concerned about facilitation. I'm concerned more about educating the person to be individually responsible. Because the more you depend upon facilitation for somebody to facilitate you, the more dependent you are, the less independent you are to handle yourself. And sometimes I feel, from my experience, it's best not to worry about the facilitation, but to educate a person thoroughly and then give them just a safe place where they can unravel, where they can unfold. And for myself, I find myself looking at different things and going through different things as I'm being facilitated. And frankly, I get a little bit irked when somebody comes in and starts telling me, look at this and look at that, where in their own opinion, they think they see things which I don't see yet, and it's not real to me. If it's not real to me, it may be real 6 months from now, but it's not real now. And when they try to push me into feeling anger when I haven't got my fear out yet, or feeling anger when I haven't got my apathy out yet, I personally take an affront to it and get a little bit irritable in having them interrupt me from doing what I think I should be doing. Now, who ultimately is responsible when you're on the table? You individually are responsible. And oftentimes a lot of people are rattle-mouthed. They can't keep their mouth shut. They can't keep quiet, and they go drone on and on and on and on and on and on and on with facilitation, and it keeps everybody in the whole doggone place from paying attention to what they have to pay attention to. Keep it quiet, keep it safe, and give a person a chance to unfold. And for Pete's sake, don't talk about different recipes on lemon meringue pie.
There's a couple of things about herbal medicine that a few aspects of herbal medicine I'm trying to clear up. Is that better? Okay. So I think it's in Logic and Sequence 2, there's a description of dandelion and how it balances. And I'm trying to understand how that fits in with what we've spoken about today, going upscale, and why we use them at all. That's the first thing.
Unfortunately, sometimes we have to just get through the day. And so it's nice to have something where we can balance up the body, that we can survive and get some sleep and just get through the day. Oftentimes we get into such a rush to get the body healed that we forget about taking a little time off to get some sleep and enjoy life, which helps the body heal even more rapidly. Now, don't push. It's better to have maybe once, maybe twice a week your point holding. And then you get far better results over the long haul than burning yourself out as Kyle does. Where's Tana? There you are. You know what I mean? I mean, here's a big guy. For 1 year, he's worked maybe 6 times a week at holding points. And now he's probably got down flat in bed for 4 or 5 days himself, I would imagine. He's regrowing his tonsils now. That's marvelous. You got to meet this guy. He's just one heck of a swell fellow. He can blow a didgeridoo for hours. But the thing is, with Kyle, here he has been working and working and working with people until he just can't work any longer. So let's not burn ourselves out. And that includes here. If it gets too much for us, we'll have half of us will be in bed, and the other half won't be able to carry you out of there, bring you to class. So, so that's where it is. David Whistler's in bed, by the way. Beautiful healing crisis. But I hope this answers your question. Sometimes we have to do what's necessary just to get through the day, and it's nice to know how to control the healing crisis.
So does that mean that herbs can be used just to take the edge off the situation, but, and it's not going to affect it going up?
Homeopathic remedies will do the same thing. The Bach flower remedies do the same thing. They're great balancers. It's nice to know when to use these so you can just get a good night's sleep.
So in Doug's book, there's a list of herbs, and I noticed that most of them are organ remedies, called organ remedies in herbal medicine. And in herbal medicine, they consider them to be restorative or regenerative, whether or not they probably aren't compared to body electronics understanding. However, I was wondering how the sensitive plant fits in with that. Is the sensitive plant different to the ordinary herbs?
All I can tell you is that the sensitive plant is the #1 herb in the world to help to heal the central nervous system. And if the central nervous system doesn't heal first, then the rest of the body certainly is not going to heal. And we have found that when we start using that with many people, then everything starts flowing for them.
So might some of those other organ remedies, like there was hawthorn for the heart, etc., mullein for the lungs, could they be in the similar category as sensitive leaf?
Carol, we've used these for years satisfactorily. They're beautiful herbs. Don't avoid using an herb to clean out the lungs and get rid of the mucus and whatnot. They have their time and their place. And don't be afraid of using them, but don't become dependent upon them.
I guess I want to understand more about which herbs, or how not to use them indiscriminately, but I guess I have to look at that. But I've brought fluid extracts of nearly all of the herbs mentioned in Doug's book. They're up the back for anyone that might want some. I can actually mix up if people need 3 or 4 of those, I can mix them up in a bottle so that you only have to take 1 dose 3 times a day, and you get 3 or 4 herbs in the right proportions. And it can cut down the amount of capsules you need to swallow.
Okay, if you have a copy of the patient guide, we're going to go through the law of healing crisis there. When they get here, I believe. Probably just a short time after they get here.
Unfortunately, they were mailed today.
I hope not the United States mail. Yeah, they're coming from New Zealand. This will be found on page 4 in the patient's guide. You'll also find this if you have a copy of the Body Electronics Fundamentals. It'll be in there. Is there anybody who's got one of those handy? Could you check it with an index? It'll be in the Body Electronics Fundamentals somewhere or another. You can check in the index. Oh, okay. What's that? Well, remember the healing crisis. Okay, so we have the original law that's been, shall we say, taught for many, many years is what's known as Herring's Law of Cure. And Herring's Law of Cure states quite simply, all cure starts from within out and from the head down and in reverse order as the symptoms have appeared. So Herring was a homeopathic physician probably back about the middle of the 1800s. And his observation, which has been verified by many, many, many different people in natural health over the last 150 years, is that when the body heals, it tends to do so from the inside out, meaning what are some of the first areas to respond? Specifically, the digestive system would be a major one, the stomach, the large and small intestines. So the body tends to heal from the inside out. It also tends to heal from the head down. So what will be a very, very common symptom in healing crisis? Headaches, and in reverse order as the symptoms have appeared, which means what? No, but in Herring's law, he's basically saying in reverse order as the symptoms have appeared, which means what? You're going backwards in time, so you're going to go through the most recent things before you go through the least recent things. That's Herring's observation, basically inside out, head down, and going backwards in time. Now, what John has observed over many, many, many years is that Herring's law is relatively accurate, but that you have to temper it a little bit. And so we have the law of healing crisis according to Dr. John Whitman Ray. A healing crisis, which is synonymous with what Herring calls a cure. A healing crisis will occur only only when an individual is ready both physiologically and psychologically. The basic foundation for all healing is nutritional preparedness. Now, if you go back probably, I guess, about 35 years or so, 35, 40 years ago, John used to experiment with body electronics for a lot of sports injuries. And one of the things he found was that it would work on some people and it wouldn't work on others. He'd be working on athletes who are, I guess, maybe in their teens, and he would find with some of them you could plug right in on an injury like a knee or a wrist or an ankle or a finger, and it would just heal right up marvelously right on the spot. And there would be other people where you would basically get nowhere. You wouldn't really get any results. And after a lot of trial and error, one of the things that John came to understand over the years back then was that the nutritional preparedness or the nutritional preparation was key here. Now, even today, we have people in body electronics where we occasionally get some very spectacular results on somebody who hasn't done any prior nutritional preparation. But I think, as most of you have probably seen in your point-holding groups, most of the people that are really getting good results are ones that have done quite an extensive amount of nutritional preparation, meaning a very, very full program over a sustained amount of time. As John likes to say, the nutritional preparation is only 10% of the picture at best, but it is a very, very necessary 10%. It's like the foundation that you're building upon. A healing crisis will begin from within out, just as in Hering's Law. Now, is there anybody here in this room that's been on a heavy program who has not had symptoms within the digestive system, like nausea, diarrhea, cleansing? Anybody here who's never had that on a heavy program? Okay, well, I guess not yet, Tom? All righty, well, you have to... Who's that back there? Carol? Never any, on a very heavy program, plenty of minerals and enzymes, you've never had any cleansing, any upset stomach, nausea? Like, nothing going on in the digestive system? It's only improved, okay. But no discomfort ever? Gas, anything? Okay.
Haven't you had a lot of burning in your system in point holding? But you have had the burning. Okay. Any cleansing diarrhea? Constipation? Okay. Check the eyes out. They're probably pretty clear.
Yeah. Okay, so a healing crisis will begin from within out in reverse order chronologically as to how the symptoms have appeared, tempered by the intensity of the trauma. That's a very, very key phrase there, tempered by the intensity of the trauma. Now, what does that mean, Peter?
It's been my experience and other people who run point holding groups that sometimes the first time they have their points hold, they go into the birth canal. So that must be one of the major traumas that's on the body. And that's hard to understand because that's not going backwards.
Let's talk about the level of trauma, the intensity of the trauma, going from least severe to most severe.
Speak please on the mic there.
Just from your experience in watching different people over the years, yourself included, look at the concept of not just chronological order, but intensity of trauma, where we would tend to move from the least severe traumas to the most severe traumas, and also within a given trauma, we would move through the layers of lesser severity before we worked our way up to the layers of greater severity within the same trauma.
Yes, apart from the first one, which I mentioned was the birth canal, it usually takes a form where they can't keep still on the table, and that's mainly emotional stuff. Then they come to a point where they're settling down more and keeping the body still, and then they get into the deeper of the emotions, and then they finally get into the pain. But I think the big difficulty that I find is that whilst they're getting into some word patterns, they're not releasing the emotion with it. And unless you release emotion at the same time as the duality, they'll go back to that word pattern.
Thank you. What I've observed is this, and this is the way John likes to explain it. John and I both being mathematicians by training, we tend to think alike on some of these areas. If you put your traumas on a scale, an arbitrary scale from like 1 to 100, you're going to find that the lower the number, this will be the lower level of trauma, the lesser intensity, and the higher the number, the higher the intensity of the trauma. The thing that's going to happen here is that if you're not ready to handle a trauma that's up at about a level 30 or 40 or beyond, it's simply not going to come up for you. You're going to experience the 5s and the 10s and the 20s. You're going to experience the level of trauma or the level of intensity that you're capable of handling. Now, this will even apply to the same trauma because there's layers of intensity within a trauma. I mentioned last week, for example, with respect to my knee operation, that it was under general anesthesia. So I didn't experience the whole operation in one go. I probably went through it 20 or 25 times before I was able to get the full intensity of the experience, including the incision and literally like going through the operation without the anesthesia. And actually, as evidenced by the fact that I've still got one of the scars there in part, there's layers of intensity that I haven't yet been able to get to. So you're going to find that there's a lot of different levels there. There's a lot of different layers even within the same trauma, and it may take us quite some time in some cases to get to the most intense trauma. What are your thoughts on this, Jim? You've been doing this for quite a while. Anything? Jim was an old-timer when I started, so.
Now that I'm up here, I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to add. Generally, I guess the thing I wanted to say is, thanks.
No, it's Jim.
Fred, to you. I'll go through the same thing a number of times also, the same event from 10 different perspectives. And it's kind of interesting because the first time I get into it, I think, this is it. Let's plow through this. But usually there's a few more layers on than that. So I think essentially Doug's really correct. Really, you don't get everything at the first time. And I guess I'd add one part that don't feel bad if you don't catch everything at the first time either. We always want to get through something. If we leave a little bit of lingering doubt or resistance or whatever on, we kind of say, let's stick at it another 10 hours and go at it. But I think one of the things John is saying is actually just, go out, get rested up, get prepared, and actually go at it with a new vengeance at a new time. I found, I'll give you an example. One thing that happened to me, which was extremely traumatic, happened in 1987. Yeah, I don't know if I told you. I did tell you about that. The year after the VNC. This is the thing in driving the car down, all that kind of jazz. This was really, really intense. I'm not sure I totally understand it, but it was the most intense thing I've ever experienced in my life, where I was just driving a truck down, and all of a sudden something grabbed control of my right hand and started veering the truck into the left lane, and all this word pattern came in that I can kill you anytime. And you can probably use your own imagination to figure out a few of the things that happened after that. It was pretty traumatic. And I got through it, just very, very intense. And just the other night, when my points were held, I went into that. First time I went into that with any amount of intensity. And, man, it was only like literally 2 or 3 minutes that I was in that thing. And then all of a sudden my body started to vibrate. And just from my legs on down, just I couldn't even control it. Just totally, totally vibrating. It lasted about 5 minutes, and that was out. And I had a weird understanding of that trauma. And I think what happened, as I reread it, is at the time I went through, there was really something going on at the time. And I probably processed a lot of it fairly good, but I missed a fairly significant portion of it. And it was just a little bit of a key. So once I had used a violet flame and a few other things, I had just snagged onto that last little bit, which was at a pretty high level. And it was 1% of the trauma, the last little bit. And then after that, it just flowed and only took a couple minutes. So I agree. Like your knee, I've had a lot of experiences where one experience, one injury can take a lot of times working on it. You can nibble off a little bit every time you get something else. It can be slightly discouraging, but there's a little higher level of energy that you get each time, so that for me, it has not been that discouraging.
One little glitch that many of us here have is this: we're unwilling, with all sincerity and the best of intentions, we all want to, many of us here, we really want to get it. We want it right, and we want it now, and we want it right now. Right, Linda? So we find ourselves on the point holding table, and we find ourselves going through a trauma, going through an experience, and we oftentimes get very, very upset in our own way about not getting through it 100%. Anybody here ever get a little bit discouraged in a session? Okay, the rest of you are probably, your arms are too tired to raise or something. So the thing about it is what do we often do? We look at the hole instead of the donut. In other words, a lot of times what we're doing is we're focusing on what we haven't got yet rather than being grateful for the part of the trauma that we have gone through. And this is actually one of the most important principles you can all learn in body electronics is just the law of gratitude. Just be grateful for what you are receiving. Be grateful for what you have received rather than being ungrateful for what you haven't got yet. Because what tends to happen for a lot of people is they focus so much on the part that they haven't got, or they focus so much on the fact that they haven't gotten to the bottom of it, that they forget to be thankful for the part that they have experienced. And it's this attitude of gratitude. It's this thankfulness for what we are going through. It's this thankfulness for the part that we... Do you have anything you want to say on this, Jenny? Are you sure? You understand, though. Yeah. When we can be grateful for the part that we have got, this is what puts us in a position to eventually receive the rest. It might not be right away, because we might not be ready for it. If we can be grateful for having made it to level 25, that's going to put us in position to maybe get to level 26 or level 30 if we behave. It doesn't mean we're immediately going to go straight to level 100 in a given area, because the plain and simple truth is most of us aren't ready for that yet. Most of us aren't ready to get to the full intensity of a trauma yet. I was actually, frankly, I was completely stunned the other night when Lil got the clear memory that she had of that because it was under general anesthesia. And when I asked her about it, she'd never had the memory come up before in a point holding session. So I was actually gobsmacked to see the intensity of the experience there, considering that she hadn't really peeled off any of those layers previously. Because I've seen other people like myself that have just taken years to get through, or at least months to get through just the anesthesia to where you could get the intensity. Lewis, for example, has been doing, with all the general anesthesias he's had to do a tremendous amount of work just, 23 is it, Lewis? He's had to do a lot of work just peeling through all of that. So I guess if nothing else here, what I would recommend for all of us here is be grateful that we can experience what we can experience, rather than being ungrateful that we haven't got the rest of the bit yet. Okay? Where are we at here? The individual will have the opportunity to re-experience each trauma, both physiological and psychological, beginning with the trauma of least severity. Ian? Okay. It must be recognized that traumas involving emotions, which include all traumas, will be released in order, beginning with unconsciousness, then apathy, grief, fear, anger, pain, and eventually enthusiasm or love, in conjunction with the appropriate word patterns for each emotion and thought pattern or sensory memory, which are accessible at each level.
If everything happens in reverse order, as to how it happened with the healing, why is it that you can go into something like a past life, or on the very first healing crisis go into experiencing your birth, which is extremely traumatic, and then
The level of intensity.
right, but that may be very, very traumatic to experience that.
The thing about it is it is typically a traumatic experience, but you don't necessarily get to the bottom of it. You don't necessarily get the whole intensity of it either. The way I would phrase it is this: we have a pattern of resistance. The pattern of resistance originates at the mental body level, which as you know, which is outside of time and space. That pattern of resistance has been played out in a great many different experiences over many, many lifetimes, and genetically as well. So ultimately, it's possible for us to have any of these memories. It's possible for us to have any one of those memories, which can then serve as a springboard to the underlying patterns of resistance. The overall tendency does appear to go backwards. Like most of us, for example, have a much better degree of memory of, say, the last 5 years than we do of, say, the first 5 years of our life. So there is that tendency for it to go backwards in time. And yet there's always, like you say, the exceptions where you're going to just jump right into something that's way at the beginning, or you're going to just jump right into something that's before the beginning. And I'm not quite sure how to explain that in keeping with this law. But I think it's got a lot to do with the fact that fundamentally we're using these outer experiences, the actual memories. We're using these as a springboard to the inner essence, where that inner essence, which exists at the mental body level, is not really within time and space in the first place. It's everywhere and every when. So we're using an experience that happened somewhere, some when, as a springboard to that causative factor which has affected us everywhere, every when. And I think that that's probably where the glitch comes in trying to apply this law totally literally, is that most of us, our consciousness or our perception is very, very rooted in a linear flow of time. So it's hard for us to, so we will see a contradiction based on that linearity, where perhaps from another perspective the contradiction is resolved because do you see what I'm saying? It's hard to put it in words, but I understand exactly what you're asking. Yes?
I have this question on my mind, but I don't know how to put it in words. It has to do with the experiences we have, the weaknesses of the fibers in the iris, and the points we hold, and the crystals that are relieved with the whole thing. What I want to ask is, you have an experience. I mean, does the point you hold necessarily dictate what... Gosh, this is confusing.
I got it. I have it.
Thanks.
Okay, the question is this. What is the effect upon... The question is this. If we hold a particular set of points, what effect does that have on what types of memories and situations come up, right? Okay. There will be quite an effect. Now, I should caution you all on something first of all here. Most of the time in body electronics, it's probably a good idea to go into it with a very open-ended attitude as regards what you're going to experience. We've had, I know John's had people in V&C classes that have, in their own mind, tried to do it where they would say, this is what I want to remember today. This is what I want to go through today. And there have been a couple of people I can think of, names are not important here, but a couple of people I can think of that have been very, very adamant, no matter how much John told them to the contrary, they've been very, very adamant that they were going to remember such and such today and go through such and such an experience. And in our observation, these individuals have really gotten basically nowhere with the, they haven't made a lot of progress because they're trying to limit what might come up. They're trying to say, this is what I want to remember. I mean, I want to go back through my knee operation, or I want to go back through my car accident. It's been our experience that most of the time, this is what I do. I put out a very, very simple prayer when I have my points. I say, may we each have those experiences. May we each have those experiences here today, which will be for our highest and best good. So I'm putting it in higher hands. I'm putting it to a higher intelligence than our very limited human level of intelligence. I don't think any of us here are clever enough, most of the time, or even any of the time, to really know exactly what we need to re-experience. So I think we're better off putting it into higher hands and simply dealing with whatever comes up. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. All the same, you do have a lot of influence on what is going to come up based upon what points you select. That is going to have a pretty great impact on it. But even then, you're going to get a lot of surprises. If you can be open enough in your attitude, and if you can really work on focusing your attention to the encompassment of whatever's there, you'll find that there will be all sorts of experiences that will come up that will be very unpredictable to you, very, very unexpected. I mean, absolutely not at all what you would have expected. And yet, if you've gone into it with that attitude of, may I have those experiences here today which will be for my highest and best good, they'll be exactly the experiences that you need, exactly the ones that you need. I take the position that if we're going into it with that attitude, if we've put out that prayer, may I have those experiences that I need for my highest and best good, then to me, when a memory starts to come up and we go, oh, not that one, that's not what I'm looking for, to me that's very arrogant and quite ignorant as well. I mean, it's like you're asking for help from your own God presence, and then you're thinking, what does that God presence know? That's basically the position you're taking when you have one of these memories come up, and then you just dismiss it. So choose your points wisely by all means, Esther. If there's a particular physical problem as displayed in the iris of the eye that you want to work on, intuitively and logically, and using the iris as well, using whatever you have at your disposal, make a good selection of points. But then don't limit yourself to certain memories. Don't limit yourself to certain experiences. The statement that John makes, which is a very, very good one, is if we really knew why we were reacting, we wouldn't be reacting any longer. Okay, I'm going to repeat that one. If we really knew why we were reacting, we would no longer be reacting. We wouldn't be reacting any longer. So the thing about it is none of us is really capable, because we're all seeing through a glass darkly, none of us is really capable of mapping it out in advance as to exactly what we need to experience. So basically, choose your points and then just go with what comes up. Does that get it for you, Esther?
So therefore, irrespective of the physical manifestation of a complaint, we should use two things, the iridology and intuition. That is, okay, thanks.
And a good history of the patient, a good history of the individual. Find out everything that's going on there. If you have a tendency to be a very, very logical person, where you're always trying to do everything very rationally, don't discard that, but try to step back from that every now and again, and really try to help the intuition to develop as well. Try to look at it from that perspective, because a lot of people are very, very good at the logical stuff, but they become quite limited by it. Conversely, you'll have a lot of people that always try to wing it in all cases. They're always going to try to do everything by intuition. And oftentimes they're going to really miss the boat, because there's something totally obvious that needed to be done first. So we need to strike some sort of balance between the intuitive faculties and the reasoning faculties. It's not a question of elevating one above the other, but it's a question of working on both. And I think if we all look at ourselves here, we'll recognize that we'll know which boat we tend to ride most of the time. And
because there are times when a person comes up to you with a particular complaint in the body, like maybe the problem is a headache or things like that. And you take the history and you check them all out, and they want you to kind of hold a magic point where their headaches would go off, or they have a rashes, or they have whatever thing. So you just answered my question that the intuition and the rest of it should go with it. Thank you.
Sometimes the very clear answer you'll get, Esther, is to do nothing. I mean, consider that there's always another option. It's not simply a question of what is the best way to help resolve this situation. Sometimes the realization you'll come to, one way or another, is that there's not something that you can do just right then and there. Or maybe just something very, very little, like just, give them some tapes or have them just start on it. It may not be something that's capable of resolution immediately. And, John makes the statement, we should never work on anybody unless we're led to do so by the Spirit of God. So the mere fact that somebody has come to you for your assistance, it's not always going to be appropriate for you to help that person. And where so many of us here have a lot of compulsion about wanting to be of service and wanting to help, that's a big glitch to overcome there. Go ahead. Sure? Yep. Okay, well, I was done on that one. Go ahead. Okay, John?
In answer to the previous questioner, I'd like to give two little examples about jumping into something which seems very enormous almost straight away, or jumping into past lives. From personal experience, I've met somebody who suffered incest with both father and uncle. And this was when I was doing Qigong. And she had a pain in her shoulder, and she said, could you lay your hand on my shoulder? So I laid my hand on her shoulder. And she jumped into a past life, straight away into a car accident in her previous life. The situation there was that the father and the uncle were still in her life, and she could not in any way confront what they kept stirring up. She met them on a regular basis, and this series of incest incidents, which, as you've just said, she'd totally forgotten them, but the trauma of it and the emotionality of it was continually stirred up because she met them regularly. And so to desensitize that, she went to a past life in which she had the same kind of injury, much more traumatic. Apparently being knocked down and killed by a car, having her shoulder mangled seems much more traumatic than the uncle or the father seizing her by the shoulder to begin incest. But she could confront the past because the people involved were not there. And so she confronted this incident from the past, and that desensitized the present situation. Another example, if the police, if in the past life the person was being hunted by the police, then they may have the feeling in this life that they're still being hunted by the police. And maybe they're being hunted by the police in this life for something terribly minor. But in the past life, they were being hunted by the police for something very major. All right, so they can't confront this life dinky little trauma because of the tremendous charge of the past life. But if they go into the past life first and desensitize that, then maybe they will be able to come toward confronting this life. So sometimes things earlier desensitize things later. And the things later are unconfrontable because all the people are still present and still charging them up every day. Any help?
Thank you. Right. Okay. You're all going to want to pull out a copy. You've got the. Do we've got a master of that up here? You should. Okay. You should have a form in there that's basically the program sheet, where it's going to start on around page 5 or 6 with the sensitive leaf T for the central nervous system. I think it's going to be slightly different than what's in the patient guide. Is that correct? It's been changed around a bit. It should be in the packet there. Yeah, page 6, where it says the. Thank you, Tom. It'll be on page 6, and at the top it'll say the Ray program. Yeah, that'll be it. It'll be from page 6 to about page 15 there. Okay, if we could. No, the version of my book is not as lengthy as that. Okay. The best get the one that you've been handed out because this is longer. It's got some other items in it. It should be in the packet that you got handed out today, Jenny. Okay, if we could get those the doors shut there, we're going to start the lights off and doors shut. If we could get the lights totally out there, and if we could get the projector on, who's going to run the projector there? You want to be our projector man there, Jim? There's a trigger on it, so you can pull it back to your seat. And if you can get that into good focus for us. You should all have a copy of this chart there in your photocopies. Okay. Most of you have already had some information in this. Got it. Okay, basically, this is an iridology chart that has been devised by Bernard Jensen. It's a good chart. There's plenty of other eye charts out there. You'll find that most of your eye charts will agree with each other on most things, although you're always going to get a certain amount of variation from one eye chart to the next. As we go through things during the week here, we will make a few revisions to this chart, primarily adding things where we find that there's certain things that will show up in more than one place in the chart. You'll notice at the start here that the eye chart is divided up into 7 zones, where these zones go from the inside out. Now, the first zone is going to be right here, right like that, and that'll. Okay, if you look here, basically in the Jensen chart, in the right eye, immediately around the pupil where it'll say stomach and pylorus, or in the left eye where it'll say stomach and cardia, immediately around the pupil, that's referred to as zone 1. Now, from a structural standpoint, zone 1 tends to refer to the stomach itself. With iridology, we would look at the iris not just from a structural standpoint, but also from a functional standpoint. And your zone 1 is going to relate not just then to the stomach, but it's going to relate to enzyme secretion, particularly within the digestive system. So that's going to involve a number of other structures beyond the stomach. But on a functional level, zone 1 is going to pertain to your enzymes within the digestive system, and this will be made clear when we get to some of the slides. Now, you move out here, and if you follow around in the right eye, where you've got your cecum, your ascending colon, your transverse colon, small intestines showing up here, also over here in the left eye, small intestines, transverse colon, descending colon, and sigmoid. That's going to be your zone 2. That's your zone 2, which of course structurally is going to be your intestines, and functionally it's going to be your intestines and basically your digestion and elimination.
One of the things that I'd like to have Doug to point out to you here is where the small intestine is in both the right and the left side of the Jensen chart. Okay, now, first of all, this is the first contradiction that you're going to have with the Jensen chart, because the small intestine is roughly from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the right iris, and then from about 7 o'clock to about 1 o'clock in the left iris. Now, that's all very fine and good, but I have found conclusive evidence in looking at tens of thousands of iris of eyes over the years. I have found conclusive evidence that the small intestine goes completely around the pupil of the eye, all the way around, and is, shall we say, enclosed by the large intestine. Now here is where we have overlay on top of overlay, and it's not just one fragmented picture here which tells you that's the stomach, because that's going to encompass the lining of the stomach, as we will show you later, the small intestines and part of the large intestines. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of overlapping of organ areas, because it's impossible to put a three-dimensional body on a two-dimensional surface without overlapping, and you cannot just take one little segment and say, here, this is for that, but you might have 4 or 5 different areas here, all overlapping one another, which will show up later on in the autonomic nerve wreath by the various levels of fiber structure in the autonomic nerve wreath itself, which we'll explain later. But I want you to know that one of the first contradictions will be in the small intestine area. And Doug, will you please, with your pointer, once again show all of the area where the small intestine is?
Basically, the small intestine can go all the way around in zone 1, superimposed over what's normally considered the stomach. That would be in either eye. Plus, it will be where Jensen has it, which is in the medial or towards the nose, 1 o'clock to about 5 o'clock in the right eye, 7 to about 11 in the left eye in your zone 2. So it is where Jensen has it, but it's also going to be found in zone all the way around, 360 degrees around, in zone 1 in both eyes there. You're going to have a lot of overlaps. If you want to complicate things a little bit further, in some individuals, the autonomic nervous wreath, which we'll get to in a moment, but which is basically the autonomic nervous wreath would be right out here, and it's going to form the outer portion of zone. It's going to form the outer boundary of zone 2. Well, in some people's eyes, the autonomic nervous wreath is so far in that it's actually inside zone 1. I mean, in other words, sometimes the outer border of zone 2 is closer to the pupil than the outer border of zone 1, in which case your autonomic or your small intestines can also show up all the way around in zone 2, since zone 2 is inside zone 1 in that instance.
Now you're going to have about a statistical number, about 1 out of 50,000 people who are going to have all of this reversed, where the cecum, instead of being in the right iris, will be in the left iris, and everything will be reversed in direction. And so don't be too sure of what you're looking at in the iris of the eye in case you run across a person who has everything backwards in their body. You have some people where the nervous system crosses over from one side of the body to the other. Now, for example, in my own particular case, my father had all of his internal organs totally reversed. So the heart was on the right side, the appendix was on the left side, the cecum was on the left, and the colon went around the other direction. Everything was totally reversed, and he was an absolute perfect mirror image. Then I come along, and what I have is all of my nerves, rather than coming around from my head, can you see my hand here? Coming around to the midline, they go clear around to the other side. So if I have any dental work done, I have to be shot in both sides because the nerves from clear over on this side, on my right side, are fed clear from my left, and vice versa. Now, some of you may have that same situation and not know it, because this is a lot more frequent than 1 out of 50,000. But you'll find that a lot of people are not going to have a normal eye because of the difference, actual difference in the structures and in the nervous system which apply to them.
If we move out beyond the autonomic nervous wreath, we're out into zone 3. And if you look here in the left eye where it'll say, up here around 11:30, it'll say pit G, which would be your pituitary gland. And you follow basically this all the way around through here. That's going to be your zone 3, as I'm tracing it here. And that's going to pertain primarily to your endocrine system or your glands. There will be other things that will be found there. There will be other anatomical structures that will be found in zone 3. But from a functional level, you're still primarily dealing with the endocrine system there when you're dealing with zone 3, your glands. And in particular, you're dealing with the hormonal secretions of the endocrine glands when you're looking at zone 3 there. Now, you move out here, like for example, if you look up right about here at about 10:30, where it's in the left eye where it says nose, and you follow this zone all the way around, that's going to be your zone 4. And then if you come out outside of that right here, that's going to be your zone 5. So you got your zones 4 and 5 there. These will pertain to a number of different structures. Certainly a lot of your organs and glands will go through zones 4 and 5. But one of the principal things that we'll look at in zone 4 and 5 is going to be muscles and bones. Muscles and bones. A little bit later in the week, we'll go into the bone chart that John's devised, which shows where a lot of the different bone structures will be found in the iris. Perhaps at some time in the future, what we may actually have for an eye chart will be like a base chart such as this, with a series of transparent overlays or grids that would be superimposed upon it. And it might take 5 or 10 different grids on top of it to show all the different possible overlays, where you'd have to peel off layer after layer there to really understand just what you're looking for. In my estimation, it's really impossible to do a good job as an iridologist strictly from the standpoint of reason and the intellect, because you have so many different possibilities and so many different overlays there that I don't think there's really any way to figure it out just by reason.
Okay, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag for some of you. There's a new, call it an iridology camera, that has been developed, wherein if you have a heavy brown eye, which are the brown chromatophores on the anterior surface of the eye, you can take a picture of that. But they have a way to go through that brown chromatophores and take a look at how heavy the mucoprotein level is in zone 6 and so on, right under that. And then they can take a picture and go all the way through that and take a look at the fiber level. And then they can go through that and take a look under the fiber level, back all the way down into the stroma of the eye. And you can have different levels of pictures being taken, different levels of pictures, and have them as a series of overlays where you can see the entire layout of the iris of the eye with all of its holes and separation of fibers and depth of fiber and so on, so that you know exactly what's going on. Now, we're in the process of looking at this right now and developing it, and it's going to take a while until we get it exactly where we want to. But this way, you can have about 8 or 9 pictures of the eye, and you have the entire program there, and then a year later, you get another 8 or 9 pictures, and it tells you exactly which fibers are moving up in which area, where you have healing going on in different areas, where the fiber structures from way down in the pigment layers coming up and filling in the various constitutional anomalies and weaknesses, where the blood vessels are moving through changes in the lateral nature of those blood vessels and so on. And we'll have a way of diagnosing, and we'll have a way of having a complete printed printout, shall we say, of these structures, and it'll take a while to do this. Now, for those of you who are really interested in going into a long-term program, if you're really interested in this as iridologists, it's a pure scientific approach, and you're going to be looking at tens of thousands of eyes from every possible angle, and eventually getting that all written down in a full new textbook with brand new technology. Now, this is something that we're working on now, and something that will happen in the future.
One of the things that we have to kind of throw into the picture here with respect to the iris of the eye is that there's a tremendous variation possible between what you find in your actual eye and the eye chart itself. And one of the things that you all need to understand right from the start is that, for example, if say the kidney would normally show up at about 6:30 here in the left eye, and that's where it would be found in the eye chart. In a given individual's eye, that can vary by as much as 30 degrees or 1 full hour. So this means that your kidney could be, in the left eye, could actually be anywhere from 5:30 clear around to 7:30. And that's not a question of the eye itself being rotated. I mean, one of your kidney might be found this way from where it is in the chart, and your leg might be going the other way. I mean, all the different things can vary independently up to 30 degrees or 1 hour in any direction. With this is going to make it a very, very great challenge as an iridologist, because you can't just slap a grid up there and absolutely be certain of everything that's there.
This is where Dr. Bernard Jensen spent literally millions of dollars trying to develop an effective grid that would fit all people on a computer basis. And there you get a picture taken and you have an automatic readout that tells you exactly what the problems are. You'll find that'll never work because, and I want to be a little bit specific here, because there are various herbal companies that teach very clearly they're very definite iridology programs that fit everybody on the same grid, and then they all say, okay, here's what the problem is, here's what the organs are wrong, and here's the herbs you have to take. You spend a lot of money on herbs, and you get better to a point and then no further. Now, this particular concept that every single eye fits one grid pattern is totally obnoxious to the whole truth of iridology, because of the wide variation which Dr. Joseph Deck from Germany has discovered, which other iridologists have discovered, which we have discovered in our own research, because organ placement is going to vary from one person to another, just like the variation of organ placement that a surgeon will find from one person to another in the human being. It cannot be in the same place in the eye. Therefore, all of these iridologists that are trying to put one person's iris into one grid system, they're barking up the wrong tree. And to me, it's a fraud and a cheat to the people, because the things are misrepresented to them.
Okay, if we go...
Once you've figured out where the organs are in a particular person, they will stay in those locations on that particular person, will they?
Once you find the organs staying in one location, there are times when we have seen entire portions of the eye move through the eye into new locations. I can no longer say that, because the iris itself is a very mobile, very flexible thing, just like the human body. When the human body shifts with restructuring and healing of bodily organs, with the overcoming of inherited genetic weaknesses, there's a tremendous change involved.
I don't know if you remember this, John, because as in the condition you were in Sri Lanka, you probably didn't read the facts I sent, but I saw a very interesting thing in Hamilton. I saw a woman there with a pigment spot in her eye that had been there 12 months prior, and she had very, very good photographs taken of it. The pigment spot had a configuration, where it kind of had two pieces with a little sort of bridge in between. And over the period between when she had the photos taken and when I saw her, the pigment spot had not moved, it had not changed its position. It was in the exact same spot in the iris, but it had actually rotated in place about 30 degrees, which I had never heard of or seen before.
Doug, I did get your facts, but at that time, the only thing I was concerned about was the deadly threat every day of running out of toilet paper. And that's exactly where I was. And I appreciated what you said. I looked at it and put it away and haven't looked at it since.
Well, at least it was useful, because if you ran out of toilet paper, you could have used the facts.
That's the facts.
That's the facts. It's a question of finding out the proper place and purpose of each thing in your universe. The Sears catalog was famous in the old frontier times. Question there? Okay. If you look up here in the left eye, up around 10 to 11, you'll see where it says lymphatic and circulatory systems. This is going to be your zone 6 that will go all the way around the iris. It'll be same place in both irises. And that is going to refer, as it says on the chart, to the lymphatic and circulatory systems.
And that will change also, because even that will move in toward the pupil, the greater the illness of the individual. So even that zone 6 is not fixed.
You'll see in some of the slides we'll show later this week, sometimes zone 6 is clear in here. Can move way, way, way in like that as the lymphatic and circulatory systems continue to go downhill. Might move all the way into what we would normally think of as zone 4 or even zone 3 in some cases. So you're going to get a lot of variation there, which is, again, why you can't slap up a grid. What's that? What's that? Okay. Zone 7, you see where it says skin right here at about 10:30 in the left iris? That's going to be the location of zone 7. Zone 7 will pertain not simply to the skin, but it will pertain to the skin, but it will also pertain primarily to the overall condition of the body at the cellular level. So think of zone 7 as the cellular level as well as the skin. Okay, cellular level of the body as well as the skin. And you'll notice how in the eye chart, zone 7 is relatively narrow in size. You'll find in practice in many people, zone 7 will pull in quite a ways. It'll still extend out that far, but it'll be much, much thicker in some people where it moves in, and it might be 4 or 5 times as thick as it is on the chart there.
Now, the one thing that I want to stress at this point is we're not just dealing with structure, we're dealing with function. And so if you take a look at the function, you will know that the cellular level is the last place that you can go for your nutrients. And then outside of the cells, you have your, what they call the interstitial fluid, which has the mucoprotein in it, which is what you see in the lymphatic rosary. And then as you slowly come in further, you have more and more of the muscle and structures of the body as things become more complex, as the blood supply moves in all the way from the cellular level, which is the skin level. And for example, let me put it this way. Zone 3 is called the blood-lymph area in the German charts. That's where the endocrine glands are, and that's where the endocrine glands secrete their hormones into the bloodstream. That's where the lungs give their substance into the bloodstream and so on. Now, what we're looking at is as the not the capillaries, but as the arteries move out to zone 7, then they move back into the venous system, back into zone 3. And this is very difficult to see because the blood vessels are clear back in the stroma of the eye, which is the very posterior portion of the eye. But nevertheless, that's where the blood vessels are that will coincide with the blood vessels in the body. And so as your blood supply moves from zone 3, Doug, please indicate zone 3, and moves outward, clear out to zone 7, which will be the cellular level of the body. and then moves back again into zone 3. This is a very powerful picture because whenever we see a breakage there in the natural flow of fibers and nerve supply and circulation which goes out, this tells you which part of the body is breaking down and is reflexed to other parts of the body which are breaking down at what we'll call a 0-degree reflex. We'll talk about these reflexes later. But this is an important aspect. So things are not just skin on zone 7. That's the cellular level, and that tells you what is happening to the cellular function. If that is black or dark in any manner, that means the cells are literally dying in their own toxins, and they're not able to get nerve supply, neither are they able to get circulation to their body. So if people have done terrible things to their body of one type or another, they'll develop a very, very black scurf rim, which unfortunately all of us from time to time have probably been subject to.
One of the other things that you want to consider when you look at an eye chart is this. The eye chart is a two-dimensional surface. The human body is obviously 3 dimensions, so you're always going to have some inconsistencies in an eye chart in the sense that things that are next to each other in real life in your body are not always going to be next to each other in the iris, because it's absolutely impossible to take a 3-dimensional object and accurately reduce it down to a 2-dimensional surface without all sorts of inconsistencies. This is not like taking the surface of the globe and mapping it onto a flat map. It's like taking the entire planet inside and out and trying to map it onto one flat surface. It's absolutely impossible for that to happen without some inconsistencies.
Doug, I want Doug to mathematically now go into the topological aspects of taking the Earth as compared to the human body and mapping it both inside and outside onto the iris. You understand what I mean by topologically? Okay.
Topology is a branch of mathematics that probably not too many people here have really studied in depth, but Jim maybe have a little experience in it. But at any rate, it's quite a simple matter to prove that there's absolutely no possible way to take a 3-dimensional object and to map it onto a 2-dimensional surface without having inconsistencies, because you've scaled it down, you've lost a degree of freedom, and it's absolutely impossible to do that. Try to imagine even taking like for example, you can take like a cube, for example, and you can with some consistency, if you just look at the surface of the cube, the 6 different sides of it, the 6 different faces of the cube, there is a consistent way to take the 2-dimensional aspect of the cube, the surface, and reduce that to a flat sheet of paper. That can actually be done with some degree of consistency. But if you then try to take not just the surface of the cube, but the entire cube itself, in the sense of every little point in space, inside and out, all the way within inside the cube, and try to put that into 2 dimensions, it is just absolutely and utterly impossible.
If you want to go through some very powerful mental gymnastics, get the books written by from the Walter Russell's book. It used to be the Walter Russell Foundation. It's now the Museum of Science and Philosophy. Now, the cube, without going into details on it, when you understand the various aspects of the cube as a geometric form, you will understand the basic laws which are governing the physical universe. Now, this has been revealed in a 30-day, I believe it's a 29 or 30 days to Walter Russell, where he wrote all of this down in his books, which were given to him under a tremendous amount of revelation, which I have studying his material, I can't fault it. Now, this is the book by Walter Russell, probably one of the greatest geniuses of our time, explaining the entire system of elements as we have them with his new periodic chart, which supersedes and goes way beyond the periodic chart which we use from the Niels Bohr program, and goes way into a new concept which goes into the transmutation of elements and matter, which puts us into the 21st century as far as understanding healing is concerned, because he gets into every aspect of it. But it's based upon the understanding of the cube. Now, if you understand the element of carbon, which is the basic balancing organ in the entire system of elements that we're dealing with, you'll understand the concept of cubical form, and you'll understand the basic concept between carbon, hydrogen elements on which our bodies are based. And this gets into the melanin protein complex in the human body, in every cell of the body, which controls the DNA, which controls the entire morphogenetic resonance, which controls the entire development from our embryos. Now, all of this is important in the cube concept. Now, to overcome the cube concept, hello, to overcome this cube, am I boring you? Okay, you're very polite. When overcoming this cube concept, and you understand it perfectly, you'll understand how the human mind works. That's how important this is.
Jim?
There's a whole series of books. Now, Jim, you have that handout from the Science and Philosophy. They call it the University of Science and Philosophy. You've got it in your handouts from last week, and the address is there. Just write to them and ask for the list of their books, and then start them out slowly, and you will not be disappointed, I guarantee you. This is one of the greatest things we can learn in our day, and Walter and Leo Russell are two of the most outstanding people on the planet. Both of them have passed on, but in their day, they had an understanding of things that few people on the earth ever found or had.
Okay, next slide then.
Can we come back, Doug? Do you mind?
Okay, back one.
I'd like to point out a few very important aspects from my understanding. You have the liver here roughly at 745. Over here you have the spleen at roughly 415, which puts them, if you were to fold the chart together, it put one of them just opposite the other. You will find that in the liver situation here, you have your liver under your right rib cage in this area. But you'll find one lobe of the liver over on the left side, and so you will find one confusing thing that you will see is the liver and the spleen will be overlaid in this area at 415. And so the liver and the spleen will be overlaid. You will not find that in the other iridology charts, but this is anatomically accurate. Again, you'll find roughly at 7 o'clock in the Jensen chart, the pancreas. But if you study the Joseph Deck charts in his work, you'll find the pancreas will be found over here at 4 o'clock, which will be then the tail of the pancreas at 4 o'clock in the left eye. You'll find other reflexes from the pancreas, and then you'll find basically the pancreas anywhere from about 6 o'clock on up to 8 o'clock, and that will vary in position. Once you understand how a pancreas looks in the iris of the eye, you know when you have a pancreatic problem. But again, you have what they call the bell-shaped curve. And you all know what a bell-shaped curve in statistics. The bell-shaped curve is where you have maybe at this end, down here at 6 o'clock, you might have 1 out of 100. Over here at 8 o'clock, you might have 1 out of 100. And then gradually your numbers of frequency increase as you get into the midline of 50. And that'll be roughly here at 7 o'clock. So Jensen puts it roughly right here at 7 at the pancreas. But when you get into the overall picture, it goes anywhere from about 8 o'clock until 6 o'clock, and you find the pancreas spread out through that area. The tail of the pancreas will also be located, according to Deck, anywhere from 6 o'clock to 4 o'clock over here in the left eye. So you might ask me where the pancreas is, and I have to tell you, I don't know. Let's find out what the person's symptoms are. This is why you have a write-up on the person ahead of time to find out what their symptoms are. Do they get tired after lunch and go to sleep and take a good snooze? Do they have pain right under their rib cage right here? Do their eyes get all kind of funny, and do they get headaches in the forehead temple area? And when you find out what their blood sugars are, then you can take a look in there and start looking for the pancreas. But it's never the same place twice.
I find it very important that we really need a recommended. Sorry, I find it very important that we need a recommended textbook which can give us a general idea about the symptomology of organs when we are actually doing radiology.
I have textbooks I'll bring tomorrow you can look at. You can order them. The Jensen chart will cost you roughly $125 US plus shipping. The Deck books will cost you, there's 2 different Deck books that you can get that I have. They cost you $125 roughly plus shipping. And they have been translated now into English, and you can get them in English. They were originally in German. But there's a number of other books that you can get. But start out with some basic ones, and you can use those to start with. And then remember, don't drive your stakes real deep on it, because everything that you read will have will not be set in concrete.
Okay, next one, Jim. Okay, if we're going to look over the iris, and we're going to proceed along with the program sheet that you all have there. So we're going to move from the inside out. Now, the first structure that you're going to see if that'll focus a bit, Jim. I think it works better with the Okay, immediately around the pupil, you'll have a structure that's referred to as the pupillary frill or pupillary ruff, which you should have there on your program sheet. The frill would be F-R-I-L-L, and the ruff would be R-U-F-F. The pupillary frill or pupillary ruff, which is going to be right around here around the pupil. Now, in this particular individual, the pupillary frill is pretty close to black in color, so it's very, very hard to distinguish it from the pupil itself. But what you will find is that the pupillary frill will vary tremendously in color from one individual to the next. In its best form, it's really kind of an orangey color. If you look around the room, and what I would really encourage all of you to do here this week and really throughout the rest of the seminar is take every opportunity that you can, or make every opportunity that you can, to look in each other's eyes. Get your magnifying glass, your loops and your torches out, and really get a good look at each other's eyes, and start, even as we go through the eye bit by bit this week, if we've covered the pupillary frill, we'll start looking at each other's pupillary frills and checking them out. You will find there will probably be at least a few people here in this room that will have a nice orange pupillary frill. 1 or 2 if we're lucky. You'll find there'll be a few others that will have a pupillary frill that's not really orange, but it's kind of like a reddish orange, which would sort of be like the next best thing. And then gradually, as things deteriorate, it's going to go from an orange to a reddish orange to kind of sort of an orangey brown to a lighter brown, and then progressively darker and darker brown to where it's eventually black. This is going to relate to 2 different things in the body, the pupillary frill. It's going to relate to the central nervous system, or CNS, the central nervous system, and it's going to relate to the lining of the stomach. So your central nervous system and your lining of the stomach. Now you'll see in this particular individual you do have a fairly dark pupillary frill where it's fairly difficult to distinguish it from the pupil itself. Okay? Next one, Jim. Okay, if you look very closely here, you can see you can see the pupillary frill just right here, and it's kind of a real dark brown color. Not quite black, but you can see it's quite a dark brown color there. Can y'all see that there? You'll find when you're looking at each other's eyes there that if you kind of shine the torch in from a bit of an angle, kind of coming in like this, you'll be able to see the pupillary frill a lot more readily than if you try to get the torch going in straight towards it. But you'll find it'll usually be a relatively thin and narrow thing right here. Okay. Let's hit the next one here. Okay, we've got another dark pupillary frill right here. You all see that? Now, a couple of things that I would mention here. The pupillary frill. If you see a person with a really dark black pupillary frill, you're going to find a couple things about this individual that would be true in most cases. First of all, the individual will have a great difficulty receiving things. If you have a dark black pupillary frill, there's going to be a tendency for the person to be blocked off, or shall we say they will resist receiving things, which is yin. Receiving things will be a yin activity. And also your yin is essentially going to be the effect. So a person's going to have a resistance to being the effect. Now, what you'll find is there'll be a lot of people who will get on the program and they will heal up quite well in a lot of areas in life. They'll get a lot of nice changes in the iris. They'll get a lot of nice changes in the body. And perhaps they might have started off with a black pupillary frill, and gradually over the years things will get lighter, and they'll find themselves with maybe a kind of a light brown or orangey brown pupillary frill. And yet, no matter how good of a job they do nutritionally and physically with the body, they don't quite get to the point where they have a nice orange pupillary frill, because there's still so many resistances in there, particularly in this area of receiving the experiences of life as they actually are. This is what John would call having our druthers, as in we'd druther it be this way and we'd druther it be that way. We're not receiving things as they really are. Actually, what we're really doing is we're always, on some level or another, wishing that things were other than they actually are.
As Doug has pointed out here, this is where we want something to be other than what it is, rather than being grateful for things just the way they are, where as far as we're concerned they can remain that way forever. But because of our natures and because of our, shall we say, our genetic makeup, so to speak, because of our programming, we let little things get under our, just like a burr on the saddle, we let little things get to us, and we get terribly, terribly upset over things that frankly don't amount to a hill of beans. Now here's wherein we find that many of us, because of the natures of the areas in which we get upset, this has a direct limiting effect, okay? It has a direct limiting effect on certain structures of the skull, shutting down cerebral spinal fluid, shutting down the ability of the nervous system to act properly, and creating a condition in the pupillary ruff which tells us the condition of the central nervous system. And we find out that our attitude literally shuts down in different types, in different parts of our body, according to the energy pattern that we're suppressing through our resistance. So every person who has a certain resistance pattern will literally, by reflex action, shut down the nervous portion of the body part that it represents. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. So people who have similar thought patterns, similar organs will shut down. People who have a lot of suppressed anger, their thyroid shuts down and their liver shut down. We'll get into the reflex angles on this a little bit later. People who suppress a lot of pain, the hormones from the pituitary will be completely off. People who have a lot of grief, the kidneys won't work as well. You'll have problems with the pancreas and the adrenals, and the person will shut down there. So similar resistances that we have, similar suppressed emotions that we have, will cause the common shutdown of various organs and glands in our body. Now, this is something that we need to look at. Now, can I just tell you a little observation? Here, I have asked you not to criticize anybody, not to find fault with anybody, not to condemn anybody. The things might run smoothly around here. But if somebody's smoking marijuana next to you and the smell is invading your space, doggone, you're going to have to tell that hophead to do something about quitting smoking that marijuana and tell him that that's against the rules and get out of the place. Now, that's not a matter of getting upset. It's a matter of taking affirmative action. If somebody's leaving their all the skins of their papayas on the floor in the kitchen, nicey may be totally out of place. Say, look, you left the doggone skins on the floor right here where somebody can slip on it and hurt themselves. Pick up your damned peels. Will you do that, please? And, you know, you can do it, but do it with a smile on your face. And sometimes you can have some wonderful interchanges. But the thing is, tell people as it is and be appropriate at that moment. And don't be lovey-lovey, kissy-kissy, huggy-huggy when sometimes you want to tell a person off when they really deserve it. They need to be put in their place so they understand exactly where you are, so you have the right to protect your 10 acres. But don't be critical. Don't be reactive. Be affirmative and take affirmative action. Doug.
Tom.
Yeah, let's get a little bit lighter. I mean, hey. Jealous guys. You don't have a kakuri. Oh. Could you show me how to tie this then? I don't know how to do it. A lot of martial artists have to suppress pain. It's something that we all do, and I know there's a few of us out here, all the way back to the back room, with Rebecca and a couple other guys around here. How does suppressing pain, because it's something you have to do to function at times, to go beyond, to even get chi going or something like that, I don't understand what it is that the pituitary secretes or how shutting down pain would shut off the pituitary. I have no idea about that. Elaborate on that, please.
Bottom line. Yeah, I caught myself there. Oh my. Allow me to start over. The thing about it is, Tom, is if you look at the scale of emotions, pain is quite near the top. Pain is just below enthusiasm. If we've suppressed the pain in the body, it's going to be, until we can get back through that level of pain, it's going to be impossible for us to get to the mental body. Absolutely impossible. And it's only at the mental body level that we can really start to overcome the resistances that are there. It's only at the mental body level that we can really get to the causative factors and really get to the underlying dualities, the underlying resistance patterns, the underlying judgments that we ourselves have set in motion. So the thing is, as long as all that pain is locked in there, whether it's through martial arts or whether it's through marijuana or whether it's through surgery or whether it's through any of a number of other things, as long as all that is locked in there, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to get anywhere. It's going to be very, very difficult for us to progress because it's a very great block for us. The thing about it is that if you can go into a body electronics session with the proper mindset, so think of it this way. Whether you've been overtly taught this or whether it's just a pattern you've fallen into because the pain is so intense, most of your martial artists, virtually all of your martial artists, are used to basically ignoring the pain or in some level or another sort of dissipating it so they don't have to deal with it. There'll be very, very few martial artists that are actually capable of basically, as John would say, observing, receiving, recreating, and releasing the pain just as it's happening. I mean, every punch, every time they're getting hit, they're transmuting it. Very, very, very few people will do that. So what the martial artist is typically done is they've learned to keep on going by ignoring the pain or by only experiencing a very, very small amount of the pain.
Ian, are you here? Ian, wait. Okay, bring Ian Wade in here for a minute, if you would. We're going to illustrate a point. May I have the lights on for a moment? May I have the lights on for a moment? Just a minute, Tom. When you get to cranial work, you'll understand what we're dealing with. Is Ian out there? Was anybody here in Auckland, in the seminar in Auckland, when we had a seminar there, and Ian was putting one person after another down to the ground?
We got Dave here.
Dave, come on up here, please. We'll let you talk about Ian. And I want to talk to you about it because I told Ian to give it to me just like everybody else on a certain move. I'll let Dave tell you the story firsthand. You remember this, sir? It's using non-resistance. Remember when he couldn't budge me? You don't remember that. Sang him down there. Okay, but I didn't suppress that pain. I experienced the pain, but I didn't mind that it hurt. Now explain that. Explain that to the people.
Okay, if you have a resistance to pain, it increases a lot. Okay, we can demonstrate it quite easily on a keen volunteer. Does anyone want to volunteer for me? Brooke. Oh, Brooke will.
Brooke needs the experience.
We don't need to stand.
Yeah, just here will do.
Okay. David, tell them what you're going to do so everyone knows.
Okay, I'm just going to press on a point on his arm here to inflict a bit of pain on him. Okay. Relax, so you're not going to do anything. Okay. Boom. Boom. So are you concentrating on anything at the moment?
I'm just loving the pain.
No. Okay. No, not yet. Not yet. Okay, no, okay, we'll start off with hate. Okay, so get in your mind something or someone you hate and build that up. Okay, and let it go through you. Okay? Okay. Okay, out.
Ouch.
Okay, now we're going to try it again with love. Okay, sing someone of love and let it flow through you. Okay, tell me when you got your concentration back.
Ooh, this is going to hurt then, huh?
Okay, right. Okay, nothing.
Ouch.
Okay. Now, in my experience, you can feel it to some extent. I think what most martial artists do when they suppress pain, and very successfully to the point where you can't feel anything, is actually have no emotion at all, and like they're going on autopilot, in my experience.
Now, the secret here. Come up here, Ian. You're dressed. Now, the secret is we're not going to have a whole lot of demonstrations here to show this, but I would like to have Ian tell his particular story on how he was illustrating this particular movement on putting a number of people right down into the ground. Remember that with all the big boys? Okay, now the thing was all of them had resistance. But the point of all is, what happens when you come across somebody who has no resistance to pain?
Well, there's absolutely no pain at all. Actually, what Dave was doing did a good job there. If I can get Brooke's arm. The best situation I had was one of my students built his house. You know, like every once in your life they say a man should build their own house. So he built this beautiful house, and it was next to these people that they didn't get along with. And they had such a feud going after a while that he had to sell his house, and the husband and wife and the kids all moved out, and he was really angry about that. And when I asked him to hold a point, when I asked him to get some anger in his body, he didn't actually tell me what it was. But he started thinking about this house and how those bastards next door made me move out of my house, and I wish I could kill them, and there was a serious amount of anger there. I pushed on the point, and I splattered him right on the floor. In fact, he almost hit his face on the floor going down because he went down so fast and in so much pain that he almost hit his nose and his face. Then I got him back up again and asked him to do his think about something that he loved, and he thought about loving his children, and there was absolutely no pain at all. There was absolutely no pain in the body. Now, the martial artists or some of the old masters talk about striking or defending yourself with no emotion, because if you're angry, if I'm going to fight with Brooke here and I'm thinking, Brooke, you bastard, I want to beat you up, then what do I have in my body? I have resistance straight away. So if I get to him first, maybe I win, but if I get to him and he gets to me and he's got love in his body, he might sit there and go, yeah, no big deal, and I might get nailed on the floor. One of the situations I had when I was younger, when I used to hang out in the pubs a little bit, I had a guy come up to me, grab me, and hit me full power in the jaw, which actually knocked my head just like the movies. Okay, like you see in the movies. It actually hit me full on. Just walked up, and I didn't even notice. I was lying up, standing back against the bar, walked straight up, went bang. And the next day I had absolutely no pain. In fact, I was telling him last night, my head flicked right around, and I turned back and looked at him and thought, why am I standing? And there was no effect to the body at all. I just looked straight back in the eye, and he just wandered off. But next day, anyone that's been hit in the jaw knows that the opposite side of the jaw gets sore the next day, and you have pain for a week or so. There's absolutely no pain at all, and there was no resistance that time when he hit me, so it was kind of interesting.
The whole key is non-resistance. And this is what we want to look at. Now, for duality's sake, if encompassing duality has any measure of credibility, you can never encompass the arts of peace without being capable of encompassing the arts of war. Because until you can encompass the arts of war, to that degree you still have resistances, which make it impossible for you to encompass the arts of peace. I'd just like to go through that a little bit. I'll let these gladiators have a seat for a minute. Ian, you have something more you wanted to share.
Dave, come back up here, please. If you have any doubts that the body is electronic, I just want to do one little demonstration here which kind of proves that. But we are totally an electronic being in some way. If I can pass it over. Yeah, it's your turn. If I get Dave's hand here and I put him in some kind of lock, actually we'll move him around here, and I want to twist the lock there and put him in pain, I can put him down, and this is sending a message through the nervous system, okay? So every time I do it, his legs buckles to get out of the way. So I do it a few more times so he knows he's going to feel it. Now what I'm going to get him to do is lift his foot off the ground here, and I'm going to do the same lock, and I'm putting enough pressure to almost break that lock, and absolutely nothing has happened. He puts his foot back on the floor again, and I get pain. So if he takes that foot off, to counter this is one of the tricks that some of the masters do to you when you go up and try them. If I take my foot and touch it on his body, he gets more pain, because now we short out the connection of the positive and negative through the body, okay? So he's not feeling any pain now on that, and I took it to a point where ideally I could have been able to break it, or should have been able to break it. So it's really as a pain response or an electronic response in the body. So that just kind of proves a lot of neat things. Okay?
Thank you.
I want to talk to you very frankly for a few minutes about the pupillary ruff or the pupillary frill. Now, when that pupillary frill is black, it's usually due to a degenerate condition. We find people who drink hot drinks, whether it's boiling hot or cold drinks where it's ice cold. This will destroy the lining of the esophagus, to destroy the lining of the stomach. And when that's destroyed, it cuts down on the natural secretion of juices. And there are many people who, after they have passed on and they've had an autopsy done on their stomach, for people who drink hot drinks, it's almost like a piece of shoe leather. Okay? The same thing is true about the cold drinks. It has a tendency to destroy the lining of the stomach, which has a direct reflex to the pupillary ruff or the pupillary frill or the central nervous system. Now, I've got to talk to you about something that you have to know if you're going to be an instructor. And this is in reference to that black pupillary ruff, or even a brown pupillary ruff. This is wherein people cannot receive the experiences of life from around them because they are resistant to receiving. Or, along with that, is their inability or resistance to give. We find this in many people who are emotionally shut down, where they cannot give of themselves to another person, and they cannot receive from that other person what that person has to give. And in a relationship between two people, and you're going to be dealing with a lot of relationships when you're dealing with iridology, you're going to be dealing with relationships which are not working because the woman cannot give of herself to the man, or the woman, when she tries to give herself to the man will not receive her. Now, this is where we have a serious, serious breakdown in communication because the man will not listen to what the woman has to say regarding what her needs are. Okay? Now, oftentimes, you'll have this situation with this black pupillary ruff or a brown pupillary ruff where there's an inadequacy in communication between two people. Now, let me give you an example, okay? You take a man who has a black pupillary ruff or a brown one. This is where they are incapable of receiving, okay? Incapable of giving. And so, oftentimes, from a reactive point of view, the man is fully justified in becoming then angry because the other person isn't doing what we think they ought to be doing. And the man will say, well, you should do such and so and such and so and such and so, and then maybe I will approve of you. And then maybe I will accept you, maybe. But because the black or brown pupillary ruff is there, the man gives the woman hope by saying that. The woman does everything she can to be a good wife to the husband, and the husband drives her away by his coldness. Are you hearing me? The inability of that man to give unto his wife what the woman needs for her nurturing. Are you hearing me? Now, as instructors, you need to understand this very carefully because whenever you see that brown pupillary frill, you know that the man or the woman who has that, there's a breakdown in that person's ability to give and receive. Now, this is wherein you will find people who are very emotional and very reactive and very, shall we say, they appear to be very loving, but that loving is only chemistry. You follow me? You know what I mean by chemistry? The girl gets the heat for the man gets the heat for the girl, and that can go on throughout all marriage, but still from a standpoint going beyond the chemistry, the people are still not communicating because they're not being rational and communicating with each other. Because the man cannot give what the woman needs, the woman cannot receive what the man's giving, and the woman cannot give to the man, and the man can't receive it when she does, because it's never good enough, it's never perfect, and it always goes back to old scars that have occurred in the marriage or relationship going back many, many years. Now, there's two types of, if I can use the word sin, from the standpoint of sin being missing the mark, if that's the definition of sin. One is wherein you don't pay attention to the mate's request for the fulfillment of needs. Because if you have a black pupillary ruff or a brown pupillary ruff, now when it gets to be a light, very light brown, it starts moving out of this area, but you're going to find a person who's so fixated in their thinking, please hear me, they're so fixated that everything has to be done a certain way, and that goes back to the programming that the person has had from their genetics. It all has to be done a certain way or it's not acceptable. So the woman has to act a certain way or the man can't accept her. And even if he does accept her, it's after he makes her feel guilty for having been otherwise for, any time along the way. And this is where the guilt trip never stops, because they can never forget and they can never let go of things that the person has done in a moment of weakness in the past. The man's responsibility is to learn how to become young. And the man has to learn this. Very few men learn this. They have to learn to give without condition a nurturing love to the wife companion. Now, don't let the man off the hook, you girls. This is the man's responsibility. He's macho, he's young, and he has to learn to be outgoing and giving of love. Most men sit back and expect the woman to come to him. Have you ever seen this? You have these arrogant men that sit back and expect the woman to come to him, but they won't do anything at all to make it desirable for the woman to come to him, and finally that woman ends up in somebody else's arms, and then he says, see, I knew that would happen. And then he's justified in not being responsible for that relationship. I hope you're hearing me. You need to counsel people and get the men off of their rear ends and get them to love without restriction their wife. The way the wife wants to be loved, not the way the man wants to love her. You follow me? Listen to what the woman's needs are and be of service to her according to her needs. And maybe she wants to be wined and dined and given a rose or two. Sorry, Anita, I forgot again. She's been waiting a year for me to get her some more flowers. I did it last year. Well, that was given to me. I received it with restriction. But Rebecca finally put it behind my ear, and I was very grateful for it. And I said, all right. Well, that's last year. Now, so therefore, the man has the responsibility to give love in a nurturing way to his wife. That way he learns to be young. Now the woman needs to learn to become yin properly and needs to receive that man's love and mirror that back to him. You know what the moon is? The moon is yin, the sun is yang. What does the moon do? The moon takes the light from the sun and does what? Reflects it back to the earth. When you take a look at the stars, you take a look at the heavenly bodies, you take a look at the sun and the moon, and compare that to the woman who is compared to the moon. That's the yin aspects, and the man is compared to the sun. The man needs to develop his yang qualities and become a leader, that he might shed light unto his wife or companion, that the woman can then reflect it back to the man. Now, where you have the black pupillary ruff and the brown pupillary ruff, okay, here's where the man can't love. Yet what does he the thing that a man cannot do, what does he expect? He expects the other person to be loving and come to the man, right? But how can a woman come to the man when the man's not putting forth the love? How can she reflect back love if there's no love there? Hey, are you hearing? All right. So where do you put the responsibility of love in a family relationship? On the man. That man has the responsibility of nurturing the woman, loving her the way she expects to be loved, and not the way he thinks she ought to be trained to receive that love. Now here's where you have a lot of men who have destroyed their relationships, but they just said, well, she wouldn't do what I told her to do. When are men going to learn to become men rather than tyrants? And today you have a lot of tyrants on men who don't have any idea, the vaguest understanding of men. And so you have a lot of women backing off because men can't be men. They're not loving, they're not kind, they're not soft, they're not gentle, they're not nurturing. This is true yang qualities. So when you're looking at the eyeball, you know that a man, myself included, okay, this is a principle. You learn to assume the virtue if you have it not. Right? And you learn to train yourself to become that which eventually you will become by doing it. And that's by becoming loving and then overcoming it. Now, if a wife were wise, and she has a black pupillary ruff or a brown pupillary ruff, if she were wise, she would reflect back to the man love until that man had the sense enough to rise to the occasion and become a man that she would want him to be, by her continual support and outgoing love. Until he's so ashamed for not loving her, he just cannot help but do otherwise. Right, Anita? So you take those of us with this big brown pupillary ruff, and after a while, the loving woman will literally tame that man who is, shall we say, hurting inside because he can't receive love and can't give love because of whatever genetic conditions we have. Now this is where the fun begins. So the woman then, if she hasn't got any light to reflect, she learns how to manufacture it, and that is where she learns how to do a little bit of yang along with the yin. Anita, come up here and talk to us. And vice versa, the man eventually must listen to his wife, which is becoming yin, that he may be effectively